This is a demo of GBTimelapse AutoRamp Advanced Method. The Advanced Method is simpler than the Expert Method because first, I don't need to use any neutral density filters, and second, I don't need to be with the camera while it's operating. I'm going to do a sunset time-lapse tonight with the camera set to bulb exposure mode, and I will let AutoRamp adjust the aperture as well as the ISO as the sun sets. I'm using a Canon 60D with 10 22mm zoom lens. I'll make a test exposure right now with a bulb exposure time of 1/10 of a second at f/25 ISO 100. The luminance here is about 102, which is a fine value. I don't know if the sun's going to come out here in a little while and it might get brighter. So in my setup, I'm using a neutral picture style for these JPEGs, and I have AutoRamp turned on with a target luminance of 110. I'll let AutoRamp adjust the aperture from its initial f/25 up to f4. I'll let it adjust ISO from the initial ISO 100 to ISO 1600, and I will let it shift the aperture and the ISO whenever the bulb exposure time increases to 2 seconds. It'll go to a maximum bulb time of 30 seconds, and I've set the minimum bulb time to 1/10 of a second and the switch time to 1/10 of a second, so it will not try to switch out of bulb mode. I'm not using any neutral density filters, and I have sunrise sunset compensation set. So I've set my location for my GPS coordinates so that AutoRamp can calculate the sun angle and adjust the exposure accordingly. Got the time-lapse interval set initially to 10 seconds, but that really doesn't matter. It's going to be overridden by AutoRamp. I'll show you that in a second. If I go to the project settings, you can see that this project is set up to connect with a Canon 60D and initialize the 60D to these settings. The program will start running at a relative time of 1 hour before sunset and end at a relative time of 3 hours after sunset. And the AutoRamp parameters have left the defaults as they are and check the box to reduce the night luminance to 70%. I don't want it to try to keep a bright luminance as the sun is setting. When the sun is down, the image should look darker, so it'll darken the target luminance to 70% of the initial value after the sun sets. It'll also ramp the time-lapse interval from 10 seconds between images during daylight to 33 seconds at night. That's 3 seconds longer than the 30-second bulb exposure to allow time for the image to be saved. Since I'm going to be adjusting the aperture, I want to use lens f-stop correction, and I've loaded in the table for this lens at this zoom value for the 60D. You can see that f4 is really f3.792. By having a correction table, there won't be any jumps in brightness when AutoRamp shifts aperture. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the time-lapse tab and click begin. And the program is running, but it won't start capturing until 1 hour before sunset. It's at 5:39 p.m. this evening, which is a little over an hour from now. So I can just leave and let this run. I don't have to be adding or removing any filters. I'll show you later the results of this test. Here's a video made from the images captured last night. You can see there's a bit of flicker at the beginning where the f-stop was a high f number, but that flicker diminishes as the f-stop goes down to f4. I'm going to load it into GBT Flickr so we can analyze this more carefully. Here's the folder of images I captured last night. I'll drop it onto GBT Flickr application to take a look. It automatically scans the thumbnails and builds the luminance graph. You can see how AutoRamp brought the luminance up to the target value in the first few frames. The luminance was steady up until the sun went down below the horizon. Here Here you can see the exposure settings and sun angle just at sunset. Bulb time of 1.47 seconds, aperture f16, ISO 100, sun minus 0.3 degrees. When I click the Analyze button, GBTFlickr builds a series of images with better resolution than the thumbnails. Now when I play the sequence, you can see some flicker at the beginning when the aperture f number was large. This is called aperture flicker. Because the camera's iris is mechanical, each actuation is a bit different and lets in a different amount of light. Aperture flicker is more pronounced at large f numbers because the iris opening is so small. Once the aperture was reduced to around f4, this flicker dissipated. The variations in luminance you see here are due to the different cloud patterns in each frame, not really flicker. If I turn on the settings and the split screen, you can see where AutoRamp gradually decreased the aperture from f22 down to f4 and then increased the ISO from 100 up to 1600, maintaining the luminance curve. There are a few spikes here in the peak value of the blue channel that correspond to appearances of the moon. I don't need to deflicker after the sun went down, so I'm going to set another keyframe here and just leave the rest of this sequence unchanged. So we'll deflicker the first part using the smoothing method, and then the second part we'll just leave unchanged. So I'll preview this now. Now that the preview is completed, I'll go to split screen and play before and after. Here's the original input and the deflickered output. Here you can see the amount of flicker in the input and the absence of flicker in the output. So I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and render a new folder of deflickered images. When that's done, I'll make that into a video and show you the result. Here's a deflickered result. I know this isn't the most interesting example, just gray clouds, but at least it shows you the process involved in the advanced method using GBTimelapse and GBTFlickr. I hope it works for you.